Before 1935, if you wanted to take in a major league game, you would have to have skipped out on work or school, unless it was the weekends. That's because all games were played during the day. May 24th, 1935 changed all that when President Franklin Roosevelt flipped on a switch in the White House and the newly installed lights at Crosley Field in Cincinnati flickered on for a major league game for the first time as the Reds hosted the Phillies. 25,000 Cincinnati fans would watch their team win 2-1 behind the complete game effort of pitcher Paul Derringer, who gave up 6 hits, 1 run, and struck out 3. But maybe the most amazing feat of the night was not the lights, but that the game only lasted 1 hour and 35 minutes. And while the Reds and the Phillies were the first major league teams to play under the lights, non-major league teams had played under the lights before. The first recorded use of lights for baseball was an exhibition game between 2 department stores in 1880, only a year after good old Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. And the Kansas City Monarchs of the Negro Leagues would play a night game against Phillips University on April 28, 1930 in Enid, Oklahoma, with the lights that they would carry with them from town to town. What made the league change to nearly all evening affairs? Well, it was about money. And while the Cincinnati Reds finished the 1935 season 17 games under 500, they saw paid attendance increase 117%. Soon other owners caught on and installed lights on their stadium as well. The last stadium to get lights was famously Wrigley Field, who played their first night game on August 8th, 1988. The game was rained out in the 3rd inning, but the Cubs did beat the Mets 6-4. The stadium on the north side of Chicago, known as the Friendly Confines, is still the most friendly towards day games, as the Cubs will only schedule 35 night games during the regular season, leaving 46 to be played under the sun. Major League Baseball slowly transitioned to playing at night. The All-Star Games switched to artificial illumination in 1969. Game 4 of the 1971 World Series was the first night game for the Fall Classic. It was played at Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh as the Pirates would win the game 4-3 over the Baltimore Orioles, and eventually the Pirates would win the series in 7 games. The last day game for the World Series would be Game 6 in 1987 between the Minnesota Twins and the St. Louis Cardinals at the Metrodome in Minneapolis. Technically, the game would be played under the lights either way as it was played in a dome, but ABC allowed the 4 p.m. Eastern start because it was a Saturday afternoon. The Twins would win the game 11-5 and tie the series at 3 games apiece, and they'd win Game 7 just 2 days later to capture their first World Championship in Minnesota. The Twins were formerly known as the Washington Senators, who had won their only World Series back in 1924. So, there's a little history lesson about the first night game in Major League Baseball, and the next time you settle into your seat at a game, take a minute. Look up at the bright lights that ring the stadium and think about it. You could have been missing work if it wasn't for Thomas Edison and his curious mind, and of course the wallets of team owners everywhere. This has been the Pastime Podcast with John Kemper. Please take a second and like the Pastime Podcast on Facebook and follow along at Twitter at Pastime Podcast.